Come to the stage, Dan. This is a slight change against the program. We swapped around EdgeGap and Cloudflare, so you are going to be talking about API security and performance. Is that correct?
Perfect. Yes.
Where have you come from, Stan?
I'm based in London.
Okay, fair enough.
Although I'm Italian.
You got a great accent. I thought, yeah, this is good to have all international visitors. So, stick with us. This is the final session of the day, of the first half of the day, and yes. Take it away.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It's actually, also my first talk after a long wait of presenting from home. So very excited to be face to face. I'm Daniele Molteni. I'm the product manager for the web application firewall at Cloudflare. For who doesn't know Cloudflare, we are a security and performance company. Think about basically a huge, or one of the biggest proxies in the world, where we basically can speed up application, but also secure them through the use of a number of security tools. So today, I'm going to talk about securing APIs. So APIs, of course, are the backbone of web application or mobile application, and they're becoming ubiquitous, I would say, in the world and in general on the internet. So let me first quickly go over why APIs are special and why we need to secure them in a new way. So traditional web application or HTML type of pages, they work by rendering the page on a web app which sits on a server, right? So clients just retrieve the page, which is rendered on the client side, and they show data to the end user. When it comes to API, then APIs are basically providing data to the client. So the call there is to retrieve data to the web app. The app returns the data and interacts with the database. This new framework allows a direct access to the database, so expose data, and there is, of course, a risk of exposing sensitive data or exposing the working of the application. And the reason why this is becoming very crucial is, of course, traffic volume. When it comes to APIs, which includes, of course, gaming and all this space, the traffic volume is huge. It's becoming larger than web traffic. Also, is often automated by design, right? So if you have a mobile app with a game there or any mobile app, the traffic does look like an automated traffic, and sometimes this becomes difficult to distinguish from bots or automated malicious traffic. Of course, also the applications are changing fast. There's a high engineering velocity, so this makes it difficult to protect or to define a security solution that is going to protect your application forever or for long. And of course, there are requirements when it comes to latency and false positives. So performance is, of course, key. So we need something that protects communication, but at the same time is fast for maintaining the gaming experience, for example. So I just wanted to show you one slide on data. So Cloudflare proxies about 20%, a little bit less than 20% of the proxied internet traffic. So we see a lot of data. And if I looked at the data in the last 10 months, 54% are APIs. So a little bit more than 1 out of 2 requests, HTTP requests, are APIs. And a lot of this, of course, is driven by gaming and gambling, but also financial services. So they're very, very sensitive type of connections. On the right-hand side, there is the growth, traffic growth over 10 months. And APIs, the yellow bar, is a little bit more than 20% over 10 months. That's the growth that API experienced, which is far higher than the other data type like web, which is about 10%. So this, again, speaks a lot about the importance of securing this type of traffic. So there is, of course, a lot that goes into monitoring, protecting APIs. There is detection, there is giving visibility, analyzing all the type of traffic. But today I'm going to just focus on a very pragmatic approach on how you can secure your application and mitigate potential attacks. So when I talk to customers, I often show this model, this framework, let's say, how to think about the products you're deploying. The way I urge them to think about is about like an incremental noise removal strategy, like a funnel, like this one. So you have 4 steps, and in these 4 steps, you deploy different products that aim at protecting you from different type of attacks or possible hacks or vulnerabilities. The first one is about protecting from volumetric attacks like DDoS. The second one is about knowing your attack surface area. So if you have an API exposed to your customers, to the world, then you need to know exactly what endpoints are out there, whether you need to close down some of the endpoints, what type of traffic those endpoints get, and things like that. The third one is about validating requests. So this is about like making sure that the requests you receive or your application receive comply with your business logic, and there is no malicious payload or any attempt to exploit a vulnerability. And finally, is about controlling the load that you're putting on your application. So making sure that there is no excessive load that you cannot handle. Let's start from each one. So I'm going to go over each one and give you an example of things you can deploy to protect your application. So the first one is about volumetric protection, as I mentioned. So DDoS is still a problem, right? And it's going to be always a problem for the internet. So you have to make sure that you don't compromise performance while using a network that can sustain large attacks. So key things are about avoiding a single point of failure, having a global coverage and a pretty big network to sustain those attacks, but also customize threshold and protection. And also another very short-term or practical strategy or tactic is about blocking portion of traffic you don't expect data from. Think about anonymizers like VPNs, Tor nodes, proxies. Why don't block straight away traffic coming from those points that you don't know, is not gonna be a source of good traffic. Or another thing could be ranges of IP or specific countries. So an example of this, I can't move on. Can I? Oh, thank you. So at Cloudflare, the way we solve the problem of DDoS attack is we have a huge network, 250 data centers, or almost 280, I think, basically spread around the world. So we get very close to customers or to end users, like less than 50 milliseconds to 95% of the internet. So this means that we're very close and we can reduce latency and guarantee performance, right? Think about this as a huge proxy network. So your application will sit behind this huge network. And then we deploy in every data center, we deploy the full stack of Cloudflare products, like security tools. And so those security solutions will run on every request very close to the user, right? And you don't have to worry about that, about whether they work or not. And because the network is so big and we have a big capacity, then we can withstand very huge DDoS attack. So you'll solve that problem basically out of the box. But let's double click on what we offer in each one of these servers. What are the other tools you can deploy? So second part of this framework is about protecting your attack surface area. So this is about managing basically your endpoints, having visibility of how many APIs are out there and whether you mean to expose those APIs. So one tool that you can use is, of course, discovery. So API discovery is becoming pretty common and popular in the industry. And what discovery does is to identify your active endpoints. So it looks at your traffic, listens to the traffic, and basically provides you with a list of endpoints and the relative volume of traffic for each endpoint. And this gives you confidence that what basically your most hit endpoints are the one you want to be exposed. So a typical example of a problem that customers have is older version of APIs. So perhaps you're running version 3 of your API, and then all of a sudden version 2 is still being hit, right? And you don't have visibility on that, you didn't know about that, and perhaps you stopped maintaining version 2. And that becomes and creates a vulnerability, right? Because you're gonna maintain only version 3, but if version 2 is still being used, that could expose data and business logic that you don't want to. So discovery allows you to get visibility on this part. Another big topic is authentication and authorization. You want to make sure that your APIs are protected, you are authenticating and authorizing the right people. A couple of options that we typically see customers adopting are MTLS and Auth 2.0. Another advice is keep Auth simple but uniform across your APIs. Another tools you can deploy is account takeover. So look for credentials that have been used somewhere else, perhaps have been leaked and are being used to break into your application. So there are tools, again, that you can deploy to make sure that every credential is being used is not part of let's say, username and password that have been stolen somewhere else on the internet. And finally, one thing I wanted to mention is that it's not just your application you need to be mindful of. It's also all the tools that you are using, internal tooling, if you want also microservices. Think about the east-west type of traffic. So you need to make sure that you're also closing down those tooling, because this could be a source of vulnerabilities and attacks to your company. So zero trust, of course, are a possible solution you can deploy. Let me pick MTLS and just quickly tell you how this could help. So mutual TLS allows you to issue a certificate for your mobile app or a new version of the app, or even every instance of the app. You embed it in the software bundle that gets installed in an app. And then every request you're sending to in this case, through our network, for example, or to your origin, then a mutual TLS handshake will be performed, right? So the mobile device will make sure that the server is the correct one, and the server, conversely, will also make sure that the app is the correct one. So you can, there are like free tools out there that you can use. Of course, like building a public infrastructure is costly and time consuming. So for example, this is something we offer for free to all of our customers. So you can simply create a new certificate, embed in your application, and from day one you can secure your traffic and gets encrypted, and you make sure that the apps are the one that you expect. Another area is request validation, right? So after you have mitigated DDoS attacks, after you have mitigated, or you know that who makes requests is a valid device, then those devices is going to send requests. And you want to validate that every request don't carry any potential attack, or perhaps they're exploiting bugs, or just not, let's say, malformed request, right? So there are a couple of options here. There is a negative security model and positive security model. So these are the two models security talk about. We could go into the details, but I guess the high takeaway is like you can deploy both. One, the negative security model is what we call the WAF, Web Application Firewall. Positive security model is more about defining what you expect in terms of API, how the requests are they going to look like, you know what good looks like, and then you only allow that, right? So if you have a schema like a Swagger or an Open API, then you can use this file to create this positive security model. So you're going to only accept requests that comply with the schema you have created. Sometimes you have the schema for free because that comes out through your development process. And so you could, if you have that, you can already like use it in a solution like Cloudflare, where you can create immediately this positive security model. So you make sure to filter only good requests. This is an example of how it works. So a few customers have talked about, for example, you have an endpoint, like a gift card balance endpoint. You pass on the body the card number with a PIN, and you want to know, of course, what's your balance. And they are seeing that some attacks, these are of course a JSON payload, but they've seen some bots and some attacks, they send the payload which is not formatted as expected. So for example, in the bottom side, you'll see the body doesn't include like fields you need. So with schema validation, you can exactly filter out the requests at the bottom. So the requests that don't have, for example, the card number and the pin field in their body. Last one is about controlling load of requests and making sure you're not overloading your application and your server. So here, rate limiting is usually the product that everybody deploys. However, the traditional rate limiting tends to count requests coming from the individual, from a single IP. So the way rate limiting works is like, I want to meet or to make sure that the individual user doesn't exceed a number of requests per minute, for example. You only allowed 10 requests per minute, okay? The problem we're seeing is that the IP, which was the way to distinguish individual users, is becoming meaningless nowadays, and especially with APIs. So a way to mitigate attacks or to count requests in the API world is to count on a session ID, a user ID, or a query parameter, for example. In this case, you are counting things regardless of the IP of origin. So if someone is authenticated as a session ID, then you count 10 requests that are coming only from this specific session ID. This is very effective because, of course, you're bypassing the issues with IPs, that IPs are rotated, bots might share or have different IPs. So there's an effective way to really focus on the sessions and making sure that each session is performing a number of requests that you're allowing. Quota management is another aspect of this. This is more like long-term. You're saying, in a month, my customer can only perform 10,000 requests. And that's also another way to really keep that volume of requests in check. And finally, logging and monitoring is also a very useful tool when it comes to security. And this is something, of course, it would be better to have in place. This is an example of how rate limiting works. A common use case is, for example, for gaming, are like bots that try to abuse loyalty or credit points, right? They just go out and try to probe endpoints and look for credits that they can use. So this is an example of a possible endpoint to check credit or loyalty points. So in this case, you're passing an account in the query and you have a session in the cookie. So what we are saying is that sometimes bots are sharing different IPs. They have the same session ID, but the requests come from different IPs. And so what you can do here is count requests on that session ID, and then you limit the number of requests, or if you want, of this botnet can perform to break into that specific endpoint. And of course, you could also count on the account. So any part of the request could be used to mitigate this level of request. Okay, I think I'm the end, last slide. So just a couple of final words. So APIs, if you're using APIs, then please consider security. This is growing. The number of attacks we're seeing to APIs is growing. The sophistication as well is growing, and the majority of the internet traffic is becoming APIs. So consider tools that are specifically designed for this type of traffic and to avoid attacks. There is no, let's say, one size fits all. What we recommend is to use like a multi-layered approach. So different tools are deployed at different level of granularity to prevent different type of attacks. And finally, whatever you deploy, of course, depends on what you need, on the specific application, the infrastructure you're using, and things like that. So if you want to know more, we are at, I think, booth G11. So you can come and we can have a chat and we can tell you more.
Awesome, thank you so much. Does anybody have a quick question? Any questions in there? I think it's quite it's very technical, but it's interesting. This track, not just you, I stress, you're actually a little lighter, so it's quite hard to absorbing information again. It's a new experience for us. We've all been at home. What's the one? You said there's a few things there. If I'm a small developer, medium developer, what is the one absolute thing you should take away and use from your service? What is the absolute thing that everybody should do? You're talking about APIs. Is that the thing that everybody should be wary of at the moment?
I think the one thing you need to take away is like if you have a small app, you're developing something, make sure you are adopting a solution that secure that solution. So for example, of course, for Cloudflare, we have different plans, even like a free plan.
Yeah.
So it's something you can just join, you get in, and you get out of the box, you get a lot of protection. And so you can kind of like focus on developing your application without having to think about or worry about security.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much. And do check out Cloudflare's their booth upstairs.